Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining my presentation. My name is Milton, and I will be delivering a session called The New Learner, Ditching Outdated Concepts and Responding to a Post-COVID Reality. And let's start. Thank you. So, my name is Milton, as I explained. I'm going to begin this presentation with a short introduction. So first of all, I've been living in Mexico for 7 years. I'm from England originally, from London. I've been working for the British Council, Mexico, for 6 years now. I'm currently the senior teacher for adult courses. That means that I run our adult programs. I ensure the quality of them. I look at our products. I train teachers, and I collect data based on what students are asking for and what they are interested in. So lucky I'm privy to a lot of useful information, which has been very interesting, especially over these past couple of years. So that's my position. That's who I am. A couple of interesting things about me. Well, I think they're interesting. As you can see in the middle photo, I'm in a place called Lagunas de Zempoala. I love traveling in Mexico. Especially I love visiting places of natural beauty. I love going to lagoons, to lakes, to forests, to mountains. And as you can see in the photo, I have a very loyal companion. Her name is Kiki. She's my dog which I have adopted here in Mexico. And she's my traveling companion. I go everywhere with her. In fact, I bought a car here in Mexico just so I could travel with her. So that's how seriously I take my traveling with my dog. On the left, you can see one of my favorite hobbies. I love cooking, but at the moment, I especially love cooking outdoors. This is my hobby. I've always been a fan of barbecues and things like that. My mother's from Argentina, my father's from England, so barbecues is ingrained in my blood. But recently, I've been very motivated to learn how to cook other things outside, things like stews and more Mexican dishes using kind of comals outside. I've been experimenting a lot. One of my favorite YouTube videos that I watch is Doña Angela from De Mi Rancho a Tu Cocina. I'm practicing all of her recipes. And on the right, you can see a photo of something which represents my specialism in ELT. Academically, I've been specializing in using digital tools in the classroom, integrated as part of curriculum, during classroom activities, as part of assessment and feedback. This is an area where I'm conducting research, where I'm experimenting with our courses in the British Council, and also in which I deliver training sessions to teachers here at the British Council, and at previous B-Belts. I've been delivering at B-Belt for the last 6 years, and most of those sessions have had some sort of focus on technology. So that is my personal specialism, and that's something I very much enjoy, and I'm very much interested in, and that is going to kind of be the base of a lot of my suggestions and practical tips for today. So hopefully I can share something with you today about that. Okay, that's enough about me. Let's move on. I'd like to, before we begin, highlight what I consider to be the objectives of this presentation. I'd like to analyze and discuss how COVID has affected learners. There will be some statistics and information about how COVID has affected education in a wider sense. And also there'll be some information about how it's affected English language learning learners. And also I'll be presenting some information about how COVID has affected our learners in the British Council Mexico. As I said, I run surveys and studies on what our learners are feeling and thinking at the moment, and I'll be presenting some results. The second objective is to consider what these changes mean for teachers. So learners have changed during the period of COVID. Their preferences have changed, their motivations have changed, their kind of understanding and self-awareness as a learner has changed. So what does this mean for teachers? How do we need to adapt? How do we need to develop to ensure that we're meeting the needs of this new learner? How do we ensure that we don't keep old-fashioned routines and habits? So that's a very important point for me. What does this mean for teachers and also for educators and administrators of schools? And the final point I'd like to focus on, the final objective is I'm going to suggest 4 courses of action to ensure teachers meet these changing needs. So 4 areas which I consider in my experience to be the main areas where we're still a little bit outdated in general. I'm sure some of you teachers are very up to date with how education is evolving, but from what I can see in general and from the research I've gathered, some areas which a lot of people in education still cling on to kind of some outdated ideas. Okay. So hopefully there'll be something here in this presentation for teachers, for administrators, for managers, for everyone involved in education. Let's move on to the next slide. Even though this is a pre-recorded presentation, I'd like to make this interactive if possible. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to write in the chat box some ideas. To avoid silence, I'm going to talk over it, but please start now writing your ideas for the bullet points on the slide. So I'd like you to write some ideas about what changes you have seen in your learners since COVID. So whether you're teaching young learners in a school, whether you're teaching adults, whether you're teaching teachers, have you seen some changes in your learners' preferences? So think about what they expect in the classroom, whether it's the online classroom or the face-to-face classroom. Now many people have returned. Their study style has the way that students review and study and do homework. Has that changed at all? Their motivation, when I say motivation, I mean like their motivation for learning, and also kind of their motivation within the class, what engages them, what interests them, what keeps them focused on the class, and also their digital literacy. Has that made any change? So please write your ideas. Just 1 more minute. While you're writing your ideas, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience. I've had a very positive experience in terms of how learners have adapted to COVID. I mean, COVID has been a very difficult time for everybody. But it's been very motivating for me to see how people have adapted very, very well in so many circumstances. I know this is not the same for everyone. The learners that I'm personally involved with have really taken to online classes. They've really embraced the benefits of it, the flexibility of it, being able to study from home. So they're often very, very comfortable when they study. You know, they might be wearing pajamas, they might be in their room, and this, in a strange way, makes them more relaxed and lowers their affective filter. And I've noticed that this element of being more comfortable at home has had a beneficial effect. I've noticed that they've become more flexible with their study style. So they're using more digital tools to study. They're using more digital websites and applications. I've noticed that they've been more flexible in terms of coming to extracurricular activities that we open at the British Council, considering that they can join everything online. They don't have to worry about the logistics of moving backwards and forwards and commuting. I've noticed motivation has changed. A lot of people really recognize how important being able to use English in a digital platform is. So the importance of video conferencing, the importance of delivering presentations, the importance of recording yourself and things like this. So I've noticed a lot of learners really focus on these skills. And I've noticed a lot of my learners become very, very skilled at using applications and websites, and really take to it, and this is regardless of age. So this has been very positive. So I invite you, the participants, to read some of the comments that have been shared in the chat. I hope you have shared a comment. If you're still writing a comment, that's fine, don't worry. If you haven't written a comment, please do, okay? Throughout the presentation, I welcome you to ask questions, to share your experiences for the rest to see. And hopefully I can see these during the question and answer session and respond to some of your ideas. So let's move on. Before COVID, I've highlighted some information which I'd like to share with you. 34% of Mexican office workers studied and worked remotely. This is from Forbes. So around 34%. This is all approximate, and this is all based on quite small scale studies, but this is obviously by recognized institutions. So 34%, that's quite a small number. 68% of British adults never studied or worked remotely. This was quite a big scale survey, 68%, which is quite a high number. Here at the British Council Mexico, in the teaching center, we only had one corporate client which asked for online courses, and that was in 2018. 2018 and 2019, I think it was. Only one client, so we only had one course which was online. So we did have a bit of experience before the pandemic, but not much. And 58% of Mexican 15-year-olds use learning apps or websites for education. This is based on a study conducted by UNESCO. So that's quite a low number. I'm sure that's largely due to lack of access to digital resources, but 58% is lower than the number of access, the percentage of access. So quite a low amount of Mexican 50-year-olds were using technology as part of their education, because I think 60% is quite low. And then we had COVID. What happened? Since COVID, 68% of Mexican office workers want to continue to work remotely. So from 34% working remotely, this has doubled to 68%. This doesn't mean that they will all be able to, but that they've expressed desire because they feel that they can. They feel that they're able to accomplish their objectives. They feel that they're just as productive. And many companies are adapting to this new reality. So this idea of working remotely, using using technology to conduct your work has doubled in Mexico. 57% of British adults want to continue studying and working remotely. So while 60% of British adults had never studied or worked remotely, now 60% want to continue. And this is even after the pandemic, finishes, if it does one day finish. People have changed their desire of how they want their work life or study life dynamic to be. Now, 80% of British Council Mexico adult students want to study online. This is based on a survey conducted in December. So I'm sure the fact that this new Omicron variant has come out has an impact on these figures. If it was completely safe, it wouldn't be 80%, I know. But it's still surprising, going from one client to 80% of all our adult students wanting to study online and continue to study online is amazing. And even 58% of young learners and their parents want to continue studying online. Now that's something I found very surprising. It's still a majority prefer studying online to studying face-to-face. Now, as I mentioned, this may be Safety plays a large role in this, of course, but it's not the only factor. A lot of people have come to terms with the validity and how useful studying online is. 75% of Mexican 15-year-olds use educational websites and apps now. So it's gone from 50 odd percent to 75%. And this is closer to the number of Mexican 15-year-olds who have access to digital devices at home. So almost all Mexican teenagers are now using digital resources as part of their education, which is good. This is something I found very surprising. 73% of American higher education students would like to take fully online courses. So 73%, 3/4 of all higher education students want to take online courses. It's amazing, isn't it? This is a survey conducted by Cengage. So, let's have some more detail on this. As you can see here, there are some interesting figures that were shared by the Cengage Digital Learning Pulse survey, which was conducted. So preferences for post-pandemic academic experiences. 70%, 65% want online courses. 70%, or nearly 70%, want a combination of in-person and online. 70% want technology to be an integral part of their studies, and almost 70% want more digital resources and more digital materials as part of their courses. So since the pandemic, students have fully embraced digital learning overwhelmingly, consistently in the 60 and 70% of students see the benefit of digital materials, digital classes, online classes, remote learning, and the like. So students' attitudes have massively changed since prior to the pandemic. As we can see on the table on the right, 60% of students are more enthusiastic about, are more optimistic about online learning than they were before. Only 16% were more pessimistic. Do you remember when everyone went online? Everyone was terrified about this change. 60% of students are now more optimistic, and as you can see, there are still high amounts in terms of using digital materials and combining courses. So I think it's very important to be aware of students' attitudes towards digital materials and online learning. It's very important, I think. Now, these figures were not as high in terms of teacher attitudes, which I thought was quite revealing. So here it says faculty attitudes, faculty changes in attitudes since prior to the pandemic. So while 60% are more enthusiastic, it's still lower than students in terms of using digital materials. Only 50% are optimistic. Basically 50% haven't changed their opinion about it. So this Cengage Digital Learning Survey demonstrates that students have really taken to this adaptation of education and learning to incorporating more digital tools and remote studying and learning. They've embraced it more than we have as teachers, which is quite interesting. And to me, that suggests that ultimately the classes that we prepare, what we do as teachers is for our learners. So we need to listen to what learners are saying, and we need to react to that. We need to understand it, and we need to do our best to respond. So why do learners want to continue online? Now, these surveys that have been conducted demonstrate some interesting information. Using technology is easier than anticipated. Many people were frightened of studying online and studying remotely and using digital tools. Now people have been forced to use it because of the circumstances. People have realized, oh, it's not actually that difficult. Oh, I'm more tech savvy than I thought. So it's actually more user friendly than people realized. Confidence in learner autonomy and independence has risen. Now, I find this extremely fascinating. So learners are more aware of their strengths and weaknesses. They're more aware of how they can help themselves be better learners. They're more aware of the strategies that they can use to increase their learning. So they've become more autonomous because of this change in dynamic, which is very positive. Once accustomed, students prefer feedback given with digital tools such as video and audio than written feedback. Now, I find this, I see this in my own experience. Video and audio feedback is much more personable. Students can listen to it, they can listen to it again, they can send you a message and ask what you meant by something, they can record it, they can organize it, they can keep it in folders. And I've noticed it in our courses. We've made digital feedback integrated into our curriculum. It's been extremely popular with students. And flexible work and study schedules are perceived as more attractive. And this is a more general point. What does this mean for teachers? What does this mean for teachers? So a lot of adult learning will remain remote, okay? As I mentioned earlier, 80% of British Council students want to continue studying online. Now, this is going to come down, of course, as it becomes more safe. But a lot of adult language learning will remain online. Students have become accustomed to this flexibility, to this independence, to this remote way of learning. So there will be a chunk of the market which remains online permanently. Continued use of digital tools for the classroom and feedback and assessment. So students will continue to expect us as teachers to use digital tools in different aspects of the course. Perhaps we will have face-to-face classes, perhaps you'll be teaching face-to-face, but students will expect digital tools to be integrated in the course and as part of your teaching. It will not only be seen as a benefit, it will be seen as integral to the course. Technology will remain a vital part of continuous professional development. So future training of teachers will need to have a bigger focus on using technology, using the tools available, and research investigations will be more focused on how to use digital tools. And even if classes are face-to-face, why young learners need technology skills for the future. More work is going to be done remotely. There will be a higher focus on working remotely. So young adults, children need to be trained in how to use these tools. Things like video conferencing, digital collaboration skills, so things like digital brainstorming, all these sorts of things that we've all become accustomed to during this pandemic in terms of working. Young learners will need these skills in the future, so this will need to be incorporated into our syllabus. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay, apologies. So, what does this mean? This goes on to what I'd like to talk about next. I've highlighted 4 areas that us as teachers and us as educators still remain a little outdated in terms of what we consider best for our learners. Now, I'm generalizing here. I'm not saying that you believe this. I'm sure you in the audience are very up to date and very, very, very flexible, very considerate about your learners' needs. But this is kind of a general assumption. So there are 4 areas that I'd like to talk about. The learning process. Many teachers still believe that what happens in the classroom is the most important for a learner's development in terms of learning a language. The 4 hours, the 2 hours, whatever it is, the 6 hours that a learner has in the classroom is where they really learn. This is, I believe, to be outdated, and I'll explain why. Digital tools are only here to supplement learning. As I mentioned before, digital tools are changing from a supplement to an integral part of learning. And I'll explain why in a minute. What learners care most about are grades. This independence that has been given to learners, this autonomy that has been given to learners, that learners have developed during this time of the pandemic, has had some interesting results, specifically for adult learners, but also for young learners as well. This focus on, why a grade is important. Of course, everyone wants to pass a course, but often grades that we give in assessments are quite arbitrary. They're based on other students within the course. They're based on some reference that our school has given us. They're not really necessarily relevant to a learner's learning pathway. And learners are starting to become more aware of this. They're much more aware of how feedback is important from the teacher. And learner collaboration only exists inside the classroom. No, well, through digital resources, we know that this is not true. So I will be discussing some ideas for this. Supporting learner commitment outside of the class. So going back to this idea that all learning, the most important learning happens inside the classroom. Well, this is not true anymore. And some ideas of how we can respond to this, our teachers, are as follows. Learning objectives should include outside classroom work. So when you create a class contract with your kids at school, when you ask your adult learners to create course objectives, we must be considering what is done outside of class. Not only homework, but personal study, personal motivation. What a learner is going to do every day, every week to improve for themselves. So, an example might be something like read a book a month, or read or comment on 4 TED videos in a month or something like that. We should be asking students to incorporate this into their personal learning plans at both young learner stage and adult stage. Students writing journal entries about out-of-class study on an online shared spreadsheet. What do I mean by this? Is that we've had some very successful experiments with learning journals with students. And what has been very interesting about moving these learning journals online is that students are able to see their peers' learning journals, to see their peers' objectives and milestones, and how they've reached different and the successes and sometimes failures that their peers have had. By sharing this, making this online and allowing everyone to see, we've created very positive communities of learning and a culture where students suggest things to each other about how to improve, and also kind of steal ideas from each other, so this has been very positive. One thing that's important to consider as a teacher is that personal study can be very hit or miss. So I have a lot of learners who think that just watching lots of Netflix is going to be useful for their English. I mean, it's not bad, it's good practice, but it's passive. And I train my learners about how to mine, how to take more from watching Netflix. So I don't know, listening out for 2 words that they don't know, listening for 3 phrasal verbs in the Netflix series they're watching, coaching your learners to be more active in their personal study, and if they're having failures, guiding them as to why this may be a failure or how they may better be able to do it. And I think one thing that's very important as a teacher is acting as a role model. You as a teacher, you may still be studying English, or you may not. You may be studying another language, or you may not. But all of us are learning something, and it's always beneficial for learners to see what we are doing as learners in whatever that may be. So give demonstrations of what you're doing yourself. Show learners what your kind of objectives are. I've been in Mexico for 7 years, and my mum's from Argentina, but my Spanish is not perfect. I learned later. So I do things like study rap lyrics, and sometimes I share that with my students, and that's motivating for them. Let's move on to the next slide. So you incorporating digital tools as part of the curriculum. So what does this mean? Skills for remote working future. As I mentioned before, young learners are in their future. There's going to be an increasing amount of technology necessary for whatever profession they decide to do. Any profession is going to involve more technology in terms of meetings online, digital brainstorming, delivering presentations. I've made a note there of digital note taking. So when they go to university, a lot of courses perhaps might be online, even after the pandemic. So it's useful to be able to take notes digitally. As you can see in the pictures on the right, I've highlighted OneNote, which is an Office 365 application. There's also a Google equivalent. There's also another one called Evernote. I think these digital note-taking applications are fantastic because you're able to not only take some notes, but you're able to keep them organized. You're able to attach documents. You're able to save images. You're able to record audios to combine with your notes. And these make this makes the note-taking much more interactive, much more multimodal, and also more difficult to lose. Because once you save it on your drivers, unless you purposely click delete, you're never going to lose it. So I've been training my students to use these digital note-taking tools a lot, and I've seen some very positive results. And I've personally been using it a lot for my own kind of to-do lists and my own learning and different things. Learning management systems, I'm sure many of you already do this. So what I mean by this is things like Google Classroom and Edmodo. Now, many people did this before the pandemic, used these before the pandemic, and many people only started using them during the pandemic. These are just absolutely vital now in courses. Students expect materials to be shared with them. Students expect to be able to hand in work digitally. As I mentioned before, videos and things like this are part of learning. So we need a space for this to be managed, whether it be Google Classroom, whether it be Edmodo or any of the other learning management systems. There really is no excuse not to use them now, I think. Digital assessment tools. So me personally, I'm not a very big fan of discrete item testing, so kind of complete the gap activities, but many institutions require them, and I do see the validity of them as progress tests. Now, we've discovered at the British Council Mexico that by moving these to a digital format, we've saved huge amounts of time for our teachers, and we've made the assessment taking more flexible. Students have been able to do their tests at home, which means that during class time, teachers have more time to teach. So there's been a bigger focus on learning in the classroom and reviewing and studying and testing at home, and this has helped contribute to a learner's sense of responsibility in terms of their own assessment. And it's been a very interesting experiment, and it's been surprisingly successful. I really feel perhaps your institution is not comfortable with making this a digital summative test. Maybe you still need some restrictions to avoid, I don't know, cheating and things like this. But in terms of progress testing, why not? It's a very useful tool. Digital feedback, I'll talk more a bit about that in a minute, but digital feedback is still very important, and will continue to be very important. And digital classroom activities. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the icons I have on the right. So these are 3 of my favorite applications which I discovered during the pandemic. So Wordwall and Bamboozle, they're quite similar. They're very, very good for practicing vocabulary. You can create kind of flashcards and you can play games with them. Wordwall is very interesting because you can also create things like spin the wheel activities and pick a random car activities, and you can adapt them to whatever you're teaching. They may be discussion questions, they may be a grammar task, they may be a vocabulary internalization activity, but they're great to manage those activities. And Padlet is something I really enjoy using in the classroom. Padlet is a digital digital wall where students can write and do collaborative writing. Now, all of these applications can be continued to be used on a digital platform if you're teaching remotely, but also face-to-face when people are using their mobile phones, or if they've got a tablet, or if they've got a computer in the classroom, or to use it for homework or whatever it may be. Next, I'd like us to reflect on assessment and how grades are not as important as perhaps us as teachers we give them, the importance we give them. Students are, especially adult students, they're beginning to understand how the feedback that teachers give is much more important and much more useful to their learning than an arbitrary grade that all too often we give as teachers. And in fact, also young learners are starting to recognize this as well, especially teens, maybe not primary and secondary students, but elder teens are really starting to recognize this. And this has been demonstrated in the growth of learner autonomy since the pandemic. So here are some kind of general principles that I'd like to highlight in terms of what we can do to respond to this this change from students. Assess less, but assess better. We don't need to be giving a strict discrete item tests regularly to learners, like complete the gap, choose the correct option. I see the validity in this in terms of informal testing. This helps learners to view their progress. But how important is the grade? Should this be going on their history of learning? Perhaps not. Perhaps the comments that we're giving students in terms of their learning is much more important. Perhaps we should also be using more integrated tests rather than discrete item tests. So tests which encourage students to produce something, a piece of writing, a speaking activity, using English in a more realistic way, and giving them feedback on that. Giving learners more responsibility and flexibility with their assessments. What do I mean by that? Do tests need to happen in the classroom? Something that has been a big success for us at the British Council Mexico is moving our tests to be done at home, to be done for homework. So we've given the responsibility of taking a test to a learner, and one of the benefits of this is that now there is more time during the course to be focused on teaching. So this time that was spent on delivering tests is now being taught on reviewing or teaching something new. Now, a lot of people are worried about doing these sorts of things because they're worried about their learners cheating at home. Well, a lot of these tools have settings which stop learners from cheating by, for example, giving them a time limit or not allowing them to open other pages. But do we need to be measuring that anyway? Can we not tell as teachers when a learner has cheated? And shouldn't we, if they are cheating, an adult learner is cheating, it's the only person that's losing is them, really, him or her. So by giving them more responsibility and flexibility, we're responding to what students are asking for. Training learners how to respond to feedback. So feedback is important, very important for learners, but all too often learners file this feedback, they put it in their drawer and they forget about it. Well, the feedback is useful. How can we ensure learners actually don't make the same mistakes next time or continue to do the things that they've been doing well next time? So things like a correction code, not correcting everything for the students, but identifying the type of mistake, learning journals. So where at the end of every week, students have to write a journal entry in terms of what they've learned in the week. When you give them feedback, they can write a response to that and put that in their journal. They can see the feedback for the whole course in that journal, so they can see how they've responded to feedback previously in the course. And by keeping this, you can really track progress, which is great. And feedback must be easily stored and tracked. So digital tools are the best for this. My favorite tools that I've discovered, well, actually before the pandemic and during, are Flipgrid, Seesaw, and Vocaroo. Flipgrid is my favorite. You can create a class, you can set up tasks, and you send video messages backwards and forth from teacher to student and student to student. It's very easy to use, it's very quick, and I've saved a lot of time by using this. Because I'm not writing down my feedback, I'm recording it. I speak quicker than I write, so therefore I can give feedback more quickly. And the great thing is that students can respond to that, and we can have a conversation. It can be interactive. It can create a kind of developmental dialogue, and it's personable. It's more memorable for the learners. Seesaw is very similar, and Vocaroo is great as well. If you haven't used them, search them, investigate them. And finally, collaboration outside the classroom. So technology allows for widespread collaboration. We know collaboration is a 21st century skill, and all too often we're focusing on collaboration between learners within the classroom. Well, let's expand this outside of the classroom, because this is a skill that they will need later in life. So let's encourage this. And how can this happen? Well, setting up collaborative homework and train learners to set up meetings. So what do I mean by this? Like set group homework, group projects, and ask them to meet outside classroom time. Give them the responsibility to set up the meeting, to arrange the meeting, to conduct the meeting, to follow up on the meeting. Especially for young learners, if you're encouraging them to do this from an early stage, this will greatly benefit them later when they start working and they have to have to do that for real, So this is a very useful skill. Use shared documents as much as possible. I really never use the offline version of Word anymore, ever, or PowerPoint. I just don't see the point. It's so much better to use the shared ones, the online ones, because I never lose them. If my computer breaks down, they're not deleted. They don't get corrupted. I can share them with people very easily. I can share them, I can, there's so many things you can do with online documents. It makes collaboration so much better. And there are now applications or websites which allow us to set up collaborations with other schools in other countries. One of my favorites is Skype in the Classroom. If you haven't registered, do register. It's free to register. You can find teachers, students from other countries, and you can set up projects where you can collaborate together. You can set up a profile and state what you're looking for, or you can just search and see what other people are offering. It's a very good tool to encourage collaboration with people outside the classroom. At the British Council Mexico, we're fortunate enough to be a global institution. So one thing that we've been doing is we've been setting up regional extracurricular activities. What does this mean? This means like practice classes with students in Colombia and Venezuela. And this has been a fascinating experience, seeing students from Colombia and Venezuela and Mexico all interact, share experiences, talk, and collaborate together. Our young learners have been collaborating with Spain. They've been collaborating with Bulgaria, with all sorts of countries. It's been a very interesting experience. So those are the 4 courses of action where I strongly feel that we can improve on as educators and as teachers. I'd like to finish now by asking you to reflect. How have your teaching practices changed permanently since COVID? So what have you changed since COVID, which will remain part of your teaching practice? Please write your ideas in the chat box. And a final question of what ideas have you taken from this presentation? What did you find interesting? What are you going to try in class? What do you feel perhaps, okay, maybe I have an outdated assumption about this. I need to respond. I need to respond to what learners are asking for. What is new for you? What have you changed your mind about? Please write these ideas in the chat box. And I'd love to respond to some of these ideas in the Q&A. So any questions or anything like that, write them down. Any comments, write them down, and we can discuss them now in the Q&A. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. Here's my dog, my companion, my traveling companion. And finally, I'd just like to share with you my email. So it's milton.bradbury@britishcouncil.org, and my Twitter handle. I'm new to Twitter, so I don't have many posts yet, but I'm looking forward to building my network and sharing ideas with you guys. So please add me, or please send me an email if you want a copy of the materials or any questions, or if you want to collaborate with me, that'd be great. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to the Q&A. Thanks, guys.